I'm kind of surprised I've never done one of these videos before. And what kind of video is that? Well, it's a video where I take a computer and I either clean it up, I restore it, or I repair it, which is what a lot of my fellow colleagues on YouTube with retro computing channels typically do. And some of them even make it the focus of their entire channel. I'm talking to you, Adrian. Well, I am going to finally take care of that on this channel. And thanks to one of my supporters, Mr. Landfill, I have an opportunity to take a Commodore 64C, get it cleaned up, and add some really cool devices to it that make it even more convenient to use. Mr. Landfill was kind enough to provide this C64C to me during Vintage Computer Festival Midwest last year. This has been a journey over several months, but we're going to take care of it today and reveal my Commodore 64C setup that I am just loving. Wait till you see the features that I've added. All right, here's a big reveal, removing the So Ready cover on the Commodore 64C, again, so graciously donated by Mr. Landfill. It's in pretty good shape. It really not much as far as cosmetically any damages. We just need to clean it up a little bit. It looks like it's had some spills, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grime. So we're going to take care of that. You can look around, even the back plate, everything looks pretty good. We'll clean up those ports as well and those connectors. There's a little bump there. Not quite as clean in the crevices there. We can get that cleaned up pretty easily. But all in all, this is a really good looking C64 and just needs a little cleaning love. Now I'm going to power this with the 64 power from Bitbinders. This was graciously sent to me by Craig over at Bitbinders, so I want to thank him for that. He is, this is kind of a little sponsor from Bitbinders for this video. So thank you again for this, and we'll see how this works as we plug it into our device. This is the first time I've ever tried to turn this device on. It has never been on, so using the 64 power, we will see if Mr. Landfill has sent me a working unit or if I need to do a little repair. I was told that it is in perfect working order, which I would assume it is. So turning on the power, we do have a power light. That's a good indication of things to come. We do need a couple of cables. We're going to need a video cable here. Also have an IEC cable, which may or may not need, because I think I'm going to use to start out with this SD to IEC to see if the Commodore 64 is working properly with an external device, such as a disk drive. This should take care of that for us. And we're going to use this fun Wimaxit monitor. I use this all the time for a lot of projects, and I love it because it has all the connectors you need for retro computing devices. And it's going to work really well with that video cable I pulled out earlier. And if you're interested in any of the devices I use in this video, I'll have links in the video description down below. Now let's get this video plugged in, plug it into the back of our 64C, and we will use these RCA plugs to go right into this monitor right here. And here's our SD to IEC device with a SD card installed, formatted properly. It's got a couple of disk images on there. I'm not even sure what's on there. We're going to find out, but you do need to plug this into the IEC port first. And then to provide power to the device, we plug this big blue plug into the user port. Make sure you get that oriented properly. All right, let's go ahead and plug in our monitor. Monitor's working. Let's turn on our power and voila, it works. We have a working C64. Let's see if we can load the directory from this SD to IEC. Yep, everything's working. Not going to worry about loading any software. Let's go ahead and just turn everything off and dig into this thing and start getting it cleaned up. As far as the cleanup goes, we've got some challenges here. We have some sticker residue on here we'll have to get removed, as well as removing stickers. We've got some really dirty areas on the sides and on the back, but I think those will clean up pretty nicely with a little love and attention. And of course the bottom we got to clean up, and we're missing a few feet. We'll take care of that too. All right, let's go ahead and remove our stickers. All those things that are on here. Here's our OK sticker. This would tell me that Mr. Landfill probably verified that this thing turned on, but oh my goodness, more residue. I'll have to get that cleaned up. Let's start with the good old scrubbing it with our fingernail technique. That's where everybody starts. Scrubby, scrub, scrub. Let's get this thing off this tub. Yeah, it's not working. We're going to have to use something a little more industrial to get that off. Always a lot of growtiness in these little power recessed areas of the case. Here's our serial number, CA13513335 for those following along. Torx screw. We're going to have to find a Torx that we need. Let's go to my handy dandy collection here. It looks like a number 3 to me. So we'll do a Torx number 3 and see if we can get these screws out of here. Yep, perfect. That's the one. There's the first one, but let me get a, there we go. Let's get some needle nose and get this thing out of here. There we go. My screwdriver is magnetic. Not sure why I couldn't pull that out. Hopefully the magnetic properties of my screwdriver will help later. Let's see. Here we go. You can see no other screws. Looks like it's just the 3 on the front side. Yep, just the 3 on the front side is all I needed to get the top of this case open. Now I'm going to use a little tool to help me get through here without hurting my case. A little spudger, and just slowly going around because I was not familiar with how this case came off. It's a little different than a bread bin case, so you have to be very careful. So take your time with it, ease yourself around it, and it should pop right off. Yeah, here's the tool if you need one of those. I don't think I have a link to that in the video description. I think I found that at, where was I? Lowe's, I believe. Yes, I believe Lowe's is where I found that. If I had just taken and moved it backwards a little bit, it would have popped right off. So that's what I learned with my little spudger tool. But we do need to remove this little LED for sure. Let's get that out of there. Be careful with that. And here's the inside. Whoa, definitely some cleanup on aisle 3. By the way, if you recognize any of that dirt, please leave a comment down below. Actually, now that I think about it, please don't. Anyway, here's a little bit more of the inside here. You can see it's pretty dirty all the way through. It's just collected years and years of dust and grime. And we'll start with the good old vacuum cleaner. That's always a good first place. Now, I didn't have one of those really cool, small, little computer vacuums. This is a big, old, just household vacuum that happens to have an adapter. And you know, after it's all said and done, this probably wasn't a bad thing to use. But it didn't get into those crevices. But it really doesn't matter because we're going to have to get into those small crevices with a different tool anyway to get this cleaned up. So I'm just giving it a good once over here to get the big stuff out of the way before we dig in. All right, see, you can tell that's already a lot better than it was. And we've gotten rid of some of the really nasty stuff. All right, I'm going to store these 3 screws before I lose them because I will lose them if I don't get them safe somewhere. All right, let's go ahead and get this keyboard off. That's going to be pretty easy. We're just going to unscrew it in several places here and take that right off. And of course, drop our screws in before we lose them. The good news is these screws are pretty easy to separate and recognize where they're used. You're not going to really run into any issues when you put them back in. You'll be able to know immediately where they go. All right, let's see if we can pop this out. Comes out of the bottom there of those little holder, that little holder area. And then not in bad shape here, but let's go ahead and unplug our cable. I like that this is a little plug. It's not one of those ribbon cables, so that's pretty nice. That's a nice little addition there. And back with the vacuuming. Again, getting in all the little crevices there. All right, we need a Phillips screwdriver and a Torque. These are the ones that we've had to use so far in case you're following along and want to know what screwdrivers you need. Let's go back to this Torque screw because we need to remove these metal plates right here. In addition to these plates that hold the keyboard, we're also going to remove the aluminum RF shield. Here are our screws. Let's go ahead and get those out of the way so we don't lose those too. Looks like there's more than just those screws. We've got some screws up top here we need to remove too. So let's go ahead and get those done. But going back to the shield, I've decided I probably will not replace that. I'll make the decision a little bit later and share what I'm going to do instead of that shield. There we go. Got that one. And rats, there's one more. It's right there. So let's go ahead and get that one out. Just when you think you've got all of them out, there's always one holding you back. There's that little offending screw. All right, now we should be able to remove this. Well, I think we should. Nope, there's another one. Oh my goodness, there's one more. There's another one right there. I can't believe I missed that one too. All right, let's get that screw out of there too. So if you're counting along, I think that was 7 screws holding on this aluminum shield, which explains why I'm probably not going to replace it. All right, now it should come right off. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Look how clean it is underneath. Wow. How did it get so dirty on the top but stay so clean underneath? And we'll go ahead and clean up a little bit. And this isn't because I'm probably going to reuse the shield. This is just to clean up the dirt so it's not falling around everywhere within my workbench here. All right, let's clean up the motherboard just a little bit, being very careful since that's a pretty powerful vacuum cleaner. And you can see we've already made a huge difference on the inside of this device, but we've still got some cleaning to do. There's a lot of little residue and dirt left on these chips and on this motherboard, but we'll get that cleaned up. Let's go ahead and get it removed from the board, or from the case rather. You can see that here. Pretty good shape. This board is in really good shape. I won't be doing anything like a capacitor replacements or anything like that. Now, we do have the shield on the bottom. I will retain that for this device because it does kind of hold and protect the bottom of the motherboard in the case. So we'll keep that on there, but still a lot of dirt in there. Oh, got some rust there. How in the world could we get some rust in there? That means there was some liquid or some moisture in there at some point. Speaking of moisture, let's go ahead and clean this case up. I'm going to use a little Dawn extra grease cutting formula, and we're going to go in here and just scrub this. Now, I know folks have thrown these in dishwashers. I was scared to death to throw it in a dishwasher for fear something would be too hot and it would warp it. So I'm going old school with my little scrubber here. It's not really a scrubber. It's kind of just a light kitchen pad, left over from Christmas, obviously, but we're gonna do the old hand approach here, and whatever dirt I didn't get will probably be pulled up when I'm drying it with this paper towel. Now that we have the bottom done, let's see if we can clean this up, especially these little recesses here where the LED was. There's quite a bit of dirt in there, but we'll get that cleaned up and that should look pretty good. We'll drop this into our grease busting dishwater here and give it a good scrubbing and once over. And now we had to try and get some of that adhesive off. We'll have to do more work on that later for sure. Now we'll get it all rinsed off again with just barely warm water. Make sure that we don't get any warm water on there that could deform the case or any of the plastic. I think it'd be hard to do that, but again, that's why I chose not to throw it into the dishwasher. Now, these little vents, that's a pain in the neck. I will have to come back to that later. I couldn't get all of the dirt out with just a paper towel. We'll have to take a toothbrush after that later, but you can see the case and it looks really good. Now, I can't wait for you to see the before and after, which is coming a little bit later in the video, so stay tuned. Doesn't that just look gorgeous? All right, let's start working on this keyboard. We definitely need to get this keyboard cleaned up, and we can do that pretty easily by disassembling this keyboard piece by piece. We'll start with this keyboard keycap removal tool. Always use one of these, folks. I can tell you from experience, I have borked a keyboard plunger connector by not using a proper tool. So you want to definitely use one of these. And remember, there is a little spring underneath. You got to be careful with that. They fly everywhere when you pull them off. So make sure you're very careful to remove those and separate those. All right, we'll go ahead and do a couple more here just for grins and giggles and to show you how this works. I will say this gets easier as you go along. You get more familiar with the process, and before no time, you're ripping them out like a pro. And as I took mine off, I discovered even more grody stuff. Look at that. Yuck. That is the dirt that stores underneath your poor keyboard over 40 years of time. All right, let's go ahead and have a little fun watching me remove these in super speed. And here's the keyboard without the keycaps. As you can see, we've got a little bit of cleaning ahead of us for sure. That is a lot of dirt, folks, right there. But we'll get it cleaned up. It'll look great afterwards. Speaking of afterwards, here we go. I had a chance. I just took it and lightly sprayed some water on it to get rid of the big stuff. And now I'm going to go ahead and dry it up. Doing the same thing before, just grabbed a paper towel and we'll see if I can get this as dry as possible. I wasn't too worried about getting water down in the plungers. It's pretty easy to clean up and it'll dry pretty quickly. And it sat for a couple of days before I put the keycaps back on, but it looks beautiful. All right, now let's get these keys cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort the keys from the springs and throw them in this little container. And in this mug, I have the springs. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video. If you are, be sure to go down there down below and hit subscribe, hit that thumbs up, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And if you really enjoyed it, make sure you look down there and learn how to be a supporter of the channel. You can even, for this video, hit that thanks button down there and let me know you appreciate this content. Now, let's get back to our project. All right, here we go, getting some more lukewarm water with our keycaps in our little container. And I'm going to put just a little spritz of this Dawn Heavy Extra Grease Cutter in here. Maybe a little more than a spritz. We're going to mix it all up here. We're going to replace the top, and then they're going to get a good shaking. And a big shout out and thank you to RetroPup for the use of her kibble bowl so I could clean these keys. So we've gone from kibbles to keys. All right, give these a good shaking. Some of you may be saying, but aren't you going to be dinging those? I'm not shaking that hard. Look at the dirt that came out of this stuff. This is what was left out of the springs and the keycaps after they were cleaned. So even before we cleaned them up, there was a lot of dirt underneath. Now I'm going to throw all of these spring. Oh, here's a broken spring. Now I did have a couple of those. One ring like that's not going to be too bad, but one of the reasons they're breaking, you see that rust right there? Somehow there was some water damage underneath. All right, time to clean our connectors. Thank you to The Future Was 8-Bit for this connector cleaner, which is basically just a nice eraser. And I did want to go ahead and give those a good cleaning. Use the eraser on that, and then took a little alcohol, which isn't shown here, but I did take a little alcohol and a cotton ball to clean those up. Now we're going to clean this motherboard, and I'm using alcohol and this toothbrush, which is kind of my workbench toothbrush. It is not the toothbrush I used this morning or later on that evening, folks. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can replace the motherboard and see if I did a good job getting it cleaned up. So we put that aluminum base back on. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to keep that because it is partly used to support the motherboard in place. So we will use that one more time, and then we'll go ahead and put our screws back in. And you'll notice I am not putting on the aluminum thermal protector and RF protector because I've decided I'm going to do something different, which you'll see here in just a minute. So let me get these screwed back in here. There's that one. There's that one. That one's in. One over here that you can't hardly see, and then way back here up in the upper corner, you can see me get that screw back in. And I forgot one right on the front right here, so we'll go ahead and get that one done too. All right, and here is the motherboard all cleaned up. I think it looks fabulous. It's definitely cleaner than it was, and getting some of that dirt off will definitely help with the efficiency of the motherboard. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I decided not to use this aluminum heat shield, RF shield. I'm just going to get rid of it. And I got rid of the thermal paste off of these chips. We'll come back to that. But for now, let's go back to our keys and see how the wash went with our keycaps. They are looking pretty good. Got all the dirt out from inside, and the keycaps themselves look really nice and clean. One of the things you'll note in this video is I am not doing any retro brightening. I don't think this computer needs it. The case probably could use it, but these keys definitely don't need it. And I don't really need it. I'm just not interested in retro brightening it. As you can see, these keys look really good. Here's a little view of the underneath of all of these keys. Here's the tops. Don't they look beautiful, folks? Is there anything better than a bunch of Commodore 64 keys all lined up like this? Wow, that's great. Let's go back and share with you what I'm going to do to replace that aluminum shield. So this is my stopgap measure for now. I have these heat sinks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place these heat sinks on the primary chips that were being used by the heat shield with that right there. And it was on these three little hinges here, not hinges, but little divots. And those were connected to, and what I'm going to do is place this so I remember which ones. It was this one, and this one right here that had thermal paste and would receive proper heat release in that shield. So I'm going to take these little heat sinks and I'm going to remove the little sticker on the bottom here, which was quite a task. And I'm just going to place these right on top of the chips that required thermal cooling earlier. Now, I will do more than just one, as you'll see. I decided to do about 3 on each chip. Now, this is not, again, the perfect scenario. The best scenario would be that I grab heat sinks that are perfectly matched with these particular chips. Okay, I think I'm also going to add, after doing some research, some heat sinks on this PLA right here. The PLA is 251715-0. And after doing some research, I found that this can generate a little bit of heat. So since we're not doing full-size heat sinks here, we'll go ahead and heat sink this with our small heat sinks too, until I can find larger ones that fit all these appropriately. This will be a stopgap measure for me. Now it's time to go ahead and get these keycaps and these springs put back together and on our keyboard. So what I typically like to do is put the spring on first, take the keycap, and then push. And you got to push pretty hard, and then you'll hear a little snap, and then you'll know it's in place, just like that. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all of these, so I'm going to speed this up, and we're going to do a little keyboard keycaps replacement montage. I do want to add a quick note about these function keys. You need to be careful. There's actually 2 pegs and 2 peg holders on the bottom, as you can see here. So you need to make sure you get the far right one right there, and then push that down on the peg to ensure that that's placed properly. If not, you will have troubles putting the top back on your keyboard case. Now the spacebar is also a bit of a challenge because it's more than just this spring. There's also this little bar that you need to clip into place. And then as you watch, you just need to kind of click that bar into the little holders, make sure you get the little guides into the holes, and then you've got to also guide the key holder on top of the spring so that it fits on the key plunger. It's a little tricky, but follow along with my video and you should be able to figure it out pretty easily. So let's go ahead and finish this up here. There you go. That works out pretty well. But it is time to put this completed keyboard back onto the C64C, plugging it into the motherboard and then sliding it into the bottom of the case. But what you'll notice is because I'm not using that heat shield, I'm also losing the ability to use those brackets that were kind of holding it in place up at the top. That's not a good scenario because you could push that keyboard down and it actually moves. So we're gonna have to do something about that. And that will require a little online research because I do not like the way that upper left corner just kind of moves and gives. We got to do something to correct that. So I went to Thingiverse and found the C64-2 keyboard mounts by Flower King. Thank you, Flower King. Got these bad boys downloaded, unzipped the file, and inside found 3 STL files. One file contained both brackets in a single file. That didn't work for my application because they weren't grounded at the bottom where I needed them to be. So I imported both brackets as separate STL files into my software. Now I use an AnchorMake Studio 3D printer that I found on a really good deal during a Black Friday several years ago. So we loaded in the STL files. Once they were placed properly and both at the same elevation in the Z axis, then I was ready to slice them right up. So I did add supports. The software does that for me automatically. Looks pretty good. And then sent them to the printer for printing. So let's pull all this support material off of our brackets. Takes a few minutes. Once you get it started, it comes out pretty quickly. And hey, is it just me or does anyone else out there find it really satisfying to remove support material from 3D prints? Let me know in the comments below to let me know I'm not the only one that enjoys this part of the process. And after we get the big pieces off, we'll use our tool here to kind of complete those smaller pieces. And that's a lot of support material, but I will tell you it was well worth it because the print is perfect. And let's face it, nobody's going to see these brackets inside the case. So let's go ahead and remove this one screw here. And then I'm going to have to lift this up. And then you have to place the bracket between the motherboard and the screw support. But I didn't have enough flexibility, so I had to go back here and remove this back screw as well. That should allow me to lift the board up enough to put the bracket into place without completely removing the motherboard from both sides. Let's see if it'll fit under there. Lifting that up, being very careful, and then just kind of hook that up and over the screw support and then right into place. Look at that. All right, and then we'll just replace our 2 screws and tighten it down, and we'll see if at least that side works. All right, there's screw number 1. Now let's go ahead and put that back screw in as well. All right, now we'll put the right bracket in. Now that one sits on top of and over the little joystick port. So all we need to do for this one is remove this single screw here, place that in right there over that joystick port, and screw it back down. And again, I'll have a link to these brackets in the video description down below if you need these for your own project. Okay, we will go ahead now and place the keyboard back into these little slots to hold it. And if you remember last time, kind of the keyboard kind of moved up and down. Now they are solid. Look at that. No flexibility in that keyboard whatsoever. Let's go ahead and replace the top. That's looking really good. Now we'll have to mess around with the top just up. I forgot to put the light in. Let's go ahead and get that done. How many times has that happened to anybody out there where you started, you think you're on a roll, and then you forget a little piece of the puzzle like this? So now we'll plug that into the motherboard, and hopefully I've got that in the right orientation. And now we'll clip the top back onto the bottom. And just a little kind of fidgeting around with it, and then it'll just click right into place. Man, this keyboard really feels good. There we go. Now it's seated properly. Now, let's check out that key. Oh, that looks great. Check it out. Can't wait to turn this on and give it a shot. But before we do, let's go ahead and put those 3 bottom screws back in. You may remember we had just the 3 in that front area right there. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Here we go, turn it over, and now everything is put back together. I think it's time to test it. But before I was able to test it, I forgot I needed to clean those vents and get into some sensitive areas. So what I did is I took some alcohol, poured it onto my toothbrush there, and gave some scrubs in areas where I just noticed I just didn't get it completely clean. So a little extra love and attention at the end there before we try it. Now, I also remembered that I need to put on these little feet on the bottom because it was missing 2 in the back, and luckily I had 2 of these clear ones in my extras. Now, they don't match exactly, but they will be fine for this use. And I will say I've used these for many projects, and they ensure that the device does not slip along on the table where they are. So they're a little bit higher than the originals, but I still think they'll be great. And hey, if they're higher in the back, that's always a plus because it'll tilt that keyboard up just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and place it here on my workbench. Yeah, that's not moving anywhere. If you try and shift this thing around, it does not move. Very well done, Stephen. I like that. Yeah, I can't wait to turn this thing on. Have I said that yet? Whew, man, that looks good. All right, let's move it into place. This is going to be the permanent location. So I've also moved the 64 power supply over there, and you'll see I have a 1541 next to it. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Let's get power on the C64 power. Let's turn it on. That's working well. Okay, and then we need to get that little monitor plugged in. So let's go ahead and get that Wimaxit monitor. Kind of step around to the back over here, and we'll plug in that video cable to the back of the 64C. And what I did find out is that I did not have the RCA plugs properly, so I did get those corrected. Turn on the little Wimaxit. This is the Competition Pro joystick I will keep on this device because you need a good mechanical joystick on your 64C, and the Competition Pro is just a blast to use for games and programs that utilize a joystick, such as Crazy Blaster. Let's try Crazy Blaster as our test. Let's plug that cartridge in, and let's turn it on and see if our C64C is working after all of me tearing it down, turning it on, and let's get everything just right and flip it on and see what we get. Success, folks. I have cleaned the 64C and it still works. If you're a supporter and viewer of the channel, you know anything working on the first attempt is a success for me. That is for sure. All right, let's go ahead and remove this cartridge because I want to check a few other things. Let's check our keyboard, make sure that it's working. Looks like everything's working there. Yep, all the keys seem to be working. I did run a thorough test on those. A little bit more than what you saw, but you know what? That monitor is way too small. So I have picked up the Eyoyo 15-inch 4x3 1028 by 768 resolution monitor with remote, and this is going to be my permanent monitor for this device. I love this monitor mainly because it has sound built in that's not half bad, and with the included remote, I can make changes to things like color and picture and sound pretty easily. I'm really starting to enjoy this particular monitor. Now, I do wish I could find one that was an IPS display, but for what I'll be using this for, I think it works really well. The view angle is a little tough on the sides, but typically when you're on a Commodore 64, you're standing right in front of it. And when you're in front of it, the image is very good. Now, again, I'll have a link to this down in the video description. Speaking of, let's get rid of that 1541 and let's add a new upgrade to my Commodore 64C, the dual drive 1581 from Bitbinders. This again was a nice gift sent over from Craig over at Bitbinders to support the channel. So let's plug it in and see if we can use these dual drives with this Commodore 64C. The drives come with a couple of utility discs that we can use, and we'll give those a shot as well. Let's go ahead and get this one plugged in. Now, I am going to set these up as drives 8 and 10. Now, I will change that in just a little bit, and you're going to want to keep watching to find out why. It's a nice little surprise coming. So we'll go ahead and see if we can load our directory from the disk. So our Bitbinders dual drive is working. I love it. Let's go ahead and grab something else though that is going to make this C64 even more fun and even more easy to use. The Ultimate 2+ cartridge, folks. There it is in all of its transparent glory. I love this device, but believe it or not, we can plug this in and use it with the Bitbinders to have a 4-drive device. So let's get that done. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug the Bitbinders. We're going to plug in the Ultimate 2+ cartridge, which includes a lot of features, which we won't go over in this video, but eventually I need to do a video on this device. Now, the first thing I tried with the Ultimate 2 cartridge was to load a couple of games, and it was speedy, folks. It was fast. So if I'm going to be working with virtual disks, the Ultimate 2 cartridge is the way I will go. So if I need to fire up Zaxxon, I'll probably load that from a virtual disk on the SD card for the Ultimate 2+. My cartridge required an update, so I got that done. And this, my friends, is what I'm calling the secret sauce to my setup. This is the Cloner Alliance AV, which captures the output from my Commodore 64, and I can capture both video and I can capture screenshots at any time by just simply hitting a button. And every time I hit the button, you'll notice that the light on the USB drive flashes to signify that I am capturing video. Now, the other great thing about this device is not only can I capture video, I can play back that video on the small built-in screen so I can see what it looks like. It's really a great little tool and works particularly well with this setup. Later, I can take that video from that USB or those images, and then I can integrate them into video that I can share with you. It's great if you just want to capture those high scores or interesting moments that you find within games or applications. Now, if you connect the device as a pass-through device, you can switch between the Commodore 64 output and the output from the Cloner Alliance AV. This is a great way to show your highlights from your video and screen captures to everybody else on the little larger screen and allow you to view them on a larger screen without having to rely on that little 3-inch monitor for your output. And when we're done reviewing our output, we can quickly go back to the output from our Commodore 64, and we can continue playing games or loading applications from our Ultimate 2+ cartridge. And by the way, remember when I said we were going to use that cartridge with our Bitbinders dual drive? Here I am using the Ultimate 2 virtual disks along with the Bitbinders, which has 2 physical drives. And what I've done is I've configured the Ultimate 2 cartridge to be drives 8 and 9. And then over here on the Bitbinders, I have the top drive configured to be drive 10, and I have the bottom drive configured to be drive 11. So now I can use any of those 4 drives at any time, all together, all separately, all in unison, and that will give me a total combined of 4 drives on this single C64C system. I think that maxes out the number of drives we can have on this computer. Is that right? 4 is the max? I believe 4 is the max. All right, there's my journey with this Commodore 64C. Thank you again to Mr. Landfill. And this is just the first time you're probably going to see this computer because I will use this as my Commodore testbed. Anytime I find something new modern devices, or I just want to play some old games or look at some old applications on the Commodore 64, that's where I'll give it a shot before I share it with you. And hey, if you like this video, check out this other retro computing video and be sure to keep up with my Mega 65 User's Guide series by starting here. That's it for me. retroCombs out.